Hey, thanks for joining me for the 15th day of the 30 Days of Live Video Challenge that I'm doing with a couple of friends. I'm excited to give you a little peek behind the curtain of one of the assessments I go through with my clients. I don't do it with all of my clients. It's pretty indicative sometimes when clients are older, if they've already accumulated a bunch of assets, whether or not they're capable of building and maintaining wealth. But for some of my younger clients who still are getting into their career, still about to finally break into that positive net worth scenario, because I think if you're younger or if you're a little bit older now and you had student loans, that's a huge hurdle to climb out of. I know things are frozen right now and paused for federal student loan payments, but student loans are quite a beast to kind of overcome and start to build wealth. And so this is something that really helps me when I'm working with younger clients to figure out where are their strengths and weaknesses. And because Level Up Financial Planner is about having fun and trying to translate some of this stuff into gamification, I kind of consider them stats. So your wealth potential stats. And I will give you a bigger view of this so you can kind of see what we're talking about here. And so basically that first one that's showing up on the screen, that's the wealth potential. That's indicative of all these other areas. That's kind of the total output. And obviously you want your wealth potential to be reasonably high. You definitely don't want it on the low scale. I'm all for balancing your ability to live your greatest life today, have an awesome life today, but still be confident and excited about the future that you're creating for yourself and those future possibilities. And so that wealth potential is important to me to some degree. More than anything, I just don't want it to be in the low end when I'm working with clients. So these all are going to be big factors, but that first one that kind of shows up, it was that black grayish kind of color, and that's frugality. So that's when it comes to spending decisions, big purchases, things like that. If you rate higher on that frugality scales, it means that you think about a process or a transaction before you actually pull the trigger. I know that's not a huge strength of a lot of people these days with Amazon and everything in our world today, where it's kind of instant gratification, click buy and you'll get it in the next day or two. So frugality is one that is really the trickiest, I think, for a lot of people, especially if they're ranking low on the wealth potential. It's because sometimes they don't have a rigorous process to run these different expenses through, these different purchase decisions. And so someone that ranks high on frugality, they actually go through a thought process and it helps them weed out just mistakes and purchases, errors that maybe are not going to add as much value to their life as they were expecting. And I think the biggest thing is just recognizing that even though you may be making a good income, even though you might have plenty of cash flow on a monthly basis, that you still understand that there's limits to what your income can buy, right? Even millionaires, you'd be surprised. This report is actually produced by the daughter of the person that wrote The Millionaire Next Door. And in the Millionaire Next Door book, you'd be surprised because millionaires actually budget. They do their monthly budget, they do weekly budgets, more so than people that are not millionaires, surprisingly. So that's one interesting thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is even millionaires maintain and keep track of a budget because they don't want to waste money. That's how they became millionaires. They didn't become millionaires just because of how much they earn. It's how much they decided to keep, and being intentional and making sure that when it comes to value and adding value to their life, they're very specific as far as what that's going to do. That's really what frugality measures. And again, if you're going to rate low in that area, it's usually because you're not thinking twice. You don't have an actual process to kind of compare and contrast different purchasing decisions, because some things are pretty basic and straightforward as far as I could eat ramen noodle or I can go to Olive Garden and get that type of meal. Big difference there. And that's a little bit easier to think about in our brains and kind of compare and contrast. But sometimes it's a matter of, well, do I go on vacation now or do I go to Starbucks every single day? Those things aren't very identically comparable. But at the end of the day, your money only goes so far. It all comes down to money and how you want to allocate your resources. And that's really where frugality comes in, is you just definitely run your thought process through a more rigorous process than someone that just says, oh, I want this, I'm going to buy it. And so the next one, that green one, is confidence. Confidence is important. It can be tricky because sometimes you could be overconfident, even though it's not valid or there's not a good reason to be that confident. But confidence does play a big role. If you're confident, you are going to be more willing to make better purchasing decisions and not be worried or scared about that fear of missing out. So I think that's where confidence plays a big factor. Is if you say this isn't going to be worth it to me, you can say it with confidence and you're not going to be overthinking and saying, oh, I wish I would have done that, or should I have made this purchase decision. When you have a process, you actually make better decisions and you'll be more confident for it. Having low confidence would be sometimes something that leads to just more spending anyways, because I mentioned this in my tips for a holiday season. When I'm buying presents, sometimes it's tricky. If I buy them too early and then all of a sudden I see something or my wife says something that maybe she wants and that's not what I got her, that could make me not feel confident about that purchase decision. And then I end up going and overspending because I'm trying to overcompensate, make sure that there's no doubt that she's going to be happy with the presents I get. Same thing can happen with just your daily life as far as, is this going to actually add enough value for you? Well, if you buy enough things, maybe it will equal that value. And that's not actually the case of how confidence will work out there. The next one is control. And the interesting thing about this is this assessment, instead of control, that used to be called responsibility. And I actually like the responsibility aspect, but I think it was confusing for people because when you think about responsibility, you think about responsibility of other people, which makes sense. But from control, they switched to control because it's more about for the things that you have control over. Do you recognize that you have that control, or do you sum things up for luck or bad luck? Even if bad things happen to you, is it always bad luck? And basically, if you have a high degree of confidence and control over a situation, it means that no matter what happens in your life, you're going to own up and take responsibility, even if it's not directly responsible. But you will be able to find different ways of, well, if I would have done this better, or if I can do this instead, I can actually make this the outcome I want it to be. And that's where control comes into it. So it's recognizing that you might have some degree of ownership, even in some extreme situations that don't go your way. Maybe there is a lot of extenuating circumstances, but at the end of the day, you feel that if you want to control that situation, you can actually get to where you want to. And that's very indicative of having a high wealth potential, is because you're not really going to accept a defeat. You're not going to collapse when there's challenges and obstacles in your way. So that's why control does have such an impact on your wealth potential. Planning and monitoring. So this is important. I think this is a big aspect of people when that's slower. That's one of the reasons why they reach out to want to work with a financial planner, because they may be good in the day-to-day and maybe even the month-to-month. And they may even enjoy some of this stuff, but the actual planning out for multiple months, different timelines, different goals and different amounts, and it gets more complicated. So this is a snapshot for one person. It's interesting when there's a couple. So if there's two people, they both have different wealth potentials. They both have different stats and different weaknesses and strengths. And so it's really interesting and fun for me to work with couples in that situation, because a lot of these times these things can be complete opposites, and sometimes it's completely identical. It depends on what you enjoy in a significant other. But planning and monitoring is going to be very important to building wealth, because you want to make sure that you're not missing out on opportunities. You want to take advantage of strategies that you could be putting in place. And then you want to be able to stick to it and monitor the situation as well, because life is constantly changing. I see this all the time where early on in your career, there might be a good path. It might make sense to go a certain way, but as life evolves, as they start to change, you haven't had the opportunity because you're too busy to find out what else is out there, what different new things may apply to your new situation, the new life that you're creating. And that's where that monitoring aspect comes in, because just because you set a plan in place, usually life and just the other circumstances and opportunities around you come up that you didn't even know were possible. And that's where monitoring is helpful to readjust, make sure you're always making the best decision for what you're trying to build for your life there. Focus is a big one too. I think it's pretty straightforward as far as, if you lose focus, then a lot of times you're not being as efficient as you could. So when I had one of my favorite stories, I might have mentioned it a couple of times already in this live challenge, but my favorite story from one of my newer clients, or one of my first clients when I first launched my business 3 years ago, was a couple, and they knew they were going to get married, but they didn't necessarily know the timeline. They didn't talk and know what that was specifically. And they both had different things in their mind as far as timeline. He was thinking 3 years, she was thinking 1 year. That's a big difference. But the fact that we talked through it, and realize that, yeah, we're going to aim for that 1 year. They gave them that focus that, well, this just moved to the top of the priority list. This is what we're going to focus on for the next year. And once they did that, they were able to cut out hundreds of dollars of expenses just within 24 hours of our conversation. So that's the power of focus. Once you get focused and know what it is that you're actually aiming for, what you're working on, what you can actually control and improve, then it makes it a lot easier. It's less about doing random things here and there that don't really add up to something. When you're focused, you know, if I do these things, this is going to make me make progress. This is going to help me level up and get to where I want to get to at the end of the day. This last one's super important. Social indifference. That's kind of the keeping up with the Joneses statistic. So if you're very much caring about what other people are doing and trying to either keep up with them or stay on top of new technology all the time for every aspect of your life, that would be very low. So your social indifference means that basically, if you care a lot about what other people are doing, it probably means that you're going to be a little bit more spendthrift when it comes to keeping up with the latest gear, making sure your clothes are new and fresh. My clothes, I don't necessarily care about those things as much. So I very rarely buy new clothes over the course of the year. But for some people, that's like a high priority. That's a top goal. And it's fine to have that in certain aspects. The problem is if it's everything. If you need top of line technology, top of line electronics, top of line TVs, video games, clothes, house, cars, vehicles, all these things, if you are trying to keep up with all those, it is going to put you in a pretty tough financial situation to be able to do that and make sure you're able to do other things like travel, make sure that you're confident about your future and the future that you're building for your family. And so that's where social indifference can get a little bit tricky. And it's harder now with social media and things like that, because that's usually what people share. And that's usually what gets the most likes. If someone bought a new Tesla or a new anything, basically, that's going to get more likes than someone saying, hey, I just paid off my student loans, or I just paid off my credit cards, and now I'm going to be able to start investing and maximize my 401ks and things like that. Those things don't get the same amount of likes as something new and shiny that you share on social media. So that's one of the tricky things with, I'd say, the modern age of trying to navigate your financial situation. Before, for people, it was just friends, colleagues, next door neighbors is really what you saw and what you were trying to keep up with. Now we're trying to keep up with the Kardashians, and it's just not realistic. Their lifestyle, their situation is not similar to someone in our kind of vicinity as far as what their income is, what goals are important to them. And so I think all these things round up and calculate out what your wealth potential is. And obviously you don't necessarily need it to be as high as it shows up here. I think it's a 95 when you look at the very specific number, but you definitely want to be north of 50 in most instances, because that means that you're going to always be in a position to do most of the things that you want to do in life. You might not be able to do them all at once. You might not be able to do them constantly or just living on the high end of every aspect of your life. But if you are on that upper end of that wealth potential, you're definitely going to have the ability to do things and be able to choose, basically. I think that's one of the biggest things, that as you build wealth, as you start to make better decisions early on in your life, you just have that flexibility to chase after opportunities, create new possibilities for yourself than someone that's on that lower end. If someone's at a 0 or a 20, if a new opportunity came up, it'd be very hard for them to make things happen if it required any ability in wealth, or for them to just even be confident in what that wealth potential is for their future. So hopefully I gave you a good behind the scenes kind of look at one of the assessments I use. This is super helpful with helping me compare and contrast not only my clients as individuals, but especially if they're couples, because again, they could be very different. And this does help them start to understand each other a little bit more. Then also, from my perspective, it allows me to better navigate and manage how they may be feeling at different points in time. If they're really high, if they have a really low social indifference, if they have a hard time with planning and monitoring and focus, that means I probably need to check in with them more often. That means that I need to make sure that when it comes to the holiday season and things like that, that we are getting organized with what's important, what's kind of the strategy for the holiday given season, and making sure that if there are big things on your items that you want, don't buy them for yourself. Put them on your list for other people to buy you. They'll feel better about it. You'll still get what you want, but you're not spending your money, and then they're having a tough time trying to find out what to get you for the holidays. And so Yeah, hopefully that gives you a good understanding as far as how all these different factors, all these different stats play into your wealth potential, because it's a big deal. All these things, if you are not confident in your future, if you feel like you're constantly just fighting an uphill battle, you're not going to feel good about that. So hopefully your wealth potential will start to skew in a more positive direction just from watching this video, understanding how these different aspects play into your life, and knowing is half the battle. But then the next step is definitely taking action, taking that next step, and making sure that you level up consistently. Don't just take one step, take that step, feel good about it, feel confident, recognize that you're doing a good thing, and then level up the next day, find another step that you can make, keep making progress. So thanks for joining me today. Let me know if you have additional questions, comments. If you want to know anything else behind the scenes that I do, or how I get to recommending and building financial plans for my clients, definitely open to share anything and everything that if you think will be of value for you.